first speaker is Dan Charnas. Dan is an associate professor at the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at NYU Tisch and the author of The Definitive History of the Hip-Hop Business, The Big Payback, and the co-creator and executive producer of the VH1 movie and TV series The Breaks. His new book, just out, is Dilla Time, The Life and Afterlife of Jay Dilla, the hip-hop producer who invented rhythm. Please welcome Dan to the stage.
All right, let's put this at short person level. Right, okay. So this is the literary mixtape, so we're going to test a little bit of your hip-hop knowledge tonight. You know, a little interactive. Okay, so I'm going to read a list of names, and I need an adjective, the adjective that comes to your mind when you hear these names together. Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Stevie Wonder, John Lennon. What's an adjective that comes to mind that describes all these people? Genius, legend, right? Brilliance. Exactly. Me too, I think so. So I spent 4 years, the last 4 years, reporting and writing a book about a fellow by the name of James DeWitt Yancey, an argument for why I think James belongs in that list of genius, brilliant names. Why I think he belongs in it is it essentially, very quickly, it's just he invented a new musical time feel. But we're not going to talk about that innovation tonight. We're going to talk about why I think his importance far outweighs his name recognition. And it's in part because I think James DeWitt Yancey spent much of his short career essentially trying to find his name. It's hard to make a name for yourself when you keep changing your name. When James was 10 years old, he started to DJ, and he came up with the fanciest DJ name he could think of for a 10-year-old. You want to know what it was? DJ Silk, right? Very, very fancy. So DJ Silk, he was actually very good in school, good with music, good with math, and his mother got him into one of the, like an aerospace vocational technical high school in Detroit. Very, very hard to get into, and he hated it. So in order to bribe him to sort of do well in school, she said, I will buy you every color silk shirt there is so that you can keep DJing as DJ Silk and have a different color silk shirt to wear. He still hated it. And his heart was really with hip-hop. But in hip-hop, also, as you might know, it requires that you have a stage name, maybe 2, maybe 3. So, for example, one of his friends in the hip-hop community on 7 Mile in Detroit, where he lived, was a guy by the name of Robert O'Brien. But he went by the name K, sometimes K-Dog, and then he eventually ended on Wajid, which is Arabic for the seeker. There was Titus Glover, who was Scandalous T, but then he became Batin, which is also Arabic for the hidden inner self. There was Ernest Tony in the crew, and Ernest became Caduce, or QD for short. And then there was R.L. Altman III. R.L. Altman III did not know what R.L. stood for. All he knew is that his grandfather and his father were named R.L. Altman. All he really knew is that he was third. So he just started calling himself 3. Or sometimes Trace, because Trace is 3 in Spanish. And then eventually he just collided the letter, the first letter, T, with 3, and he became T3. But James decided that he was going to be just plain John Doe. Not exactly the name you want if you don't want to be anonymous. By the way, there was also a white guy in the crew, Mike. And if you are the one white guy in the crew in Detroit named Mike, your name is going to be White Mike. Michael Buchanan acquired a DJ name because he set a bulletin board on fire when he was a freshman in college. He became the arsonist. And then he got his second DJ name because he always wore these little LL Bean slippers with the plush plaid insoles. So he became DJ House Shoes, which he's still to this day. So John Doe puts out his first record, and then on his second record, local record, he becomes just JD, J period D period. And he would have probably remained obscure had he not been discovered by another JD, Jonathan Davis. You know Jonathan Davis as the lead MC for the classic hip-hop crew, A Tribe Called Quest. What's the name you know him by? Q-Tip, right? So Q-Tip, who is Jonathan Davis, found JD's demo, or was given it, and the beats are so much, the music is so much like his own, that he calls him up and he basically starts mentoring him. He takes him under his wing and he introduces him to all these different rap artists, The Far Side and De La Soul and Busta Rhymes. And this kid from Detroit starts making music for all of these famous artists. But a funny thing happened when The Far Side came to New York to get beats from Q-Tip. He said, I don't really have time to do it, but my man JD, he can do it for you. He's from Detroit. And when they left, they got a little suspicious. Says, you know Q-Tip's real name is Jonathan Davis, right? He's JD. I think Q-Tip is really JD. Of course, when they met JD from Detroit, it turned out not to be the same person, but that's the kind of thing that he dealt with all his life. Now, just as JD starts to produce, Q-Tip invites him into this production collective called the Ummah, which in Arabic means the brotherhood. And the idea behind the Ummah is that we all do the work together and we all get credited as the Ummah, which essentially meant that his first production, he was deprived of credit as a matter of policy. Everybody in the crew was, but that's kind of hard when you're trying to make a name for yourself. House Shoes always used to say to him when JD would walk in the room, he'd say, oh, the Ummah's here. Right? Because he felt like JD did all the work in the Ummah. It's around this time that JD came up with this incredible, innovative, rhythmic signature. And he had a group called Slum Village, and they made an album, and that album, sort of the demo made its way around to these traditional musicians, right, who fell in love with this rhythm, and they started making their own music with traditional instruments the way this guy did on a drum machine. You know their names. Amir Thompson, who you know as Questlove. There's Michael Archer, who you know as D'Angelo. Erica Wright from Dallas. Who might that be? Erykah Badu, right? And then there was Lonnie Lynn from Chicago, who you now know as the rapper Common. They all work together, right? They all work together. Oh, by the way, you just said common sense, right? Because before he was common sense because he got sued by a reggae band who had the same trademark infringement, so he became Common. Okay. So now a lot of them are Aquarians, so they start calling themselves the Soulquarians. So now James, who's part of the Ummah, he gets subsumed into this whole Soulquarians crew. So you know how he's credited on Common's album for his production? Produced by the Soulquarians JD for the Ummah. He's smothered in brotherhood, right? So what do you do with that? How do you tell your mentor, the guy who rescued you from obscurity in Detroit, that you don't want to be his business partner? It's hard to do, and it took him years to say the words, and the words were, I just want people to know it's me. This is around the year 1999, 2000. But by this time, some other things are happening. First of all, that wonderful album he made with Slum Village gets canceled in corporate restructuring, gets shelved, right? So the only song that makes it out is this one song that ends up on the soundtrack of the movie Office Space. You remember Office Space? Where the guy's named Michael Bolton. And everybody asks him, are you related to the singer? And he's always complaining about it. And a friend says, why don't you just change your name? He says, I'm not going to change my name. He's the one who sucks. Right? But JD is now also going through this because there's a JD, a DJ in Europe who has the same name, and then there's a producer named Jermaine Dupri, who you might know from Criss Cross and DeBrat and Janet Jackson. And he started calling himself JD. So on the one hand, maybe it's time to change your name, but on the other hand, why should I change my name? He's the one who sucks. Now you know where my tastes lie. But he did, and the name came from Common, who had successfully changed his name from Common Sense. So he started calling JD J Dilla. And he took the name, but he actually kept changing his names. He was J Dilla, then he was Dilla, then he was Dilla Dog. For a while he was Dill Cosby, Dill Withers. He got a major label deal around this time, which was a chance at really making a name for himself as J Dilla. And then he got sick. He got really, really sick, a very rare blood disease. And the last 3 years of his life, he still worked like he was trying to make that name for himself. He spent his last days working from his hospital bed, according to some reports, on an album of little musical compositions, and he called the album Donuts. And on his birthday, February 7th, which would have been yesterday, 16 years ago, Donuts, the album, was released while James was in hospice, essentially. And there were record release parties that were happening all around the country, and he was hoping that he could be well enough to be there, but he wasn't. So in New York, on February 9th, 2006, this is the 8th, right? So 16 years ago tomorrow, that release party was held in New York City. Do you know where that party was held? Right here. Yeah. With Wajid, Robert O'Brien, K-Dog, on the Wheels of Steel. It was a really good feeling, and people were there celebrating whatever version of James Yancey they knew. JD, J Dilla, John Doe. And then the next morning, everyone got the news that Jay had passed. The next few days, James Yancey got some recognition he never got in life. The New York Times ran an obituary. And in the next weeks and months and years, the fandom that he did not have in life, he began to have in death. His drum machine is now in the Smithsonian, right? And if you go there, you can see the tools and the memorabilia of all of the American greats. Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, John Coltrane, James Brown, Prince, Chuck Berry, and James DeWitt Yancey.